Now this happens, and everyone's going to look at Andy Weir and go, okay, this guy is a moneymaker. This guy is
hitmaker,
brilliant. He what's he got? Artemis, I think is almost certainly going to happen now because of the success of this. And whatever his next thing is, like boom, that's going to get adapted immediately. That's going to get optioned.
Welcome back, friends, to episode 377 of the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book and then see the movie. I'm filmmaker James Bailey.
And I'm writer Luke Elliott.
And this week we discuss Phil Lord and Chris Miller's 2026 film, Project Hail Mary. Last week we got to gush about this book that we love so much by Andy Weir, Project Hail Mary. As soon as we knew it was being adapted, we knew it was going to be on this podcast. So excited to say that I got to go see this in IMAX with my family. And like what a warm hug of a film this is, and like how much fun I had with it. I'm so excited to talk to you about this. What are your initial reactions? No spoilers. What did you think of the film?
Yeah, we are going to have a robust spoiler section, but we'll let you all know before that happens. So right now we're going to keep things general. Man, what a good time this was. So every now and then, and I feel like this has happened a few times lately, we get projects that just hit everything I want out of an adaptation. This is what we do. We talk about adaptations all the time. We're tackling all these different kinds of adaptations that come and go. No adaptation is ever going to be like perfect for every fan of the book. Just never happens. But there are ones that feel like they are honoring the source material. They are faithful in all the best ways. They make smart changes. They lean into the strengths of the medium of film. And they're clearly made by people who care. And then they check all the boxes of things that you want out of a good movie, too. It's not just an adaptation to serve the book. It's like, we got to make a good movie that people are going to like. And they nail that stuff, too. And that's how I feel about this movie. Like, it is one of those times, I mean, like, Night of the Seven Kingdoms, I feel like we had a similar reaction to, where it's just like, man, I love it to see people coming out and killing it with adaptations. Yeah. And I absolutely feel that way about this movie. If you feel like there are weaknesses in the story, like, a lot of that goes to the book and, like, whether or not you like the book and that. But, like, if you like the book, like, you're going to love this movie, I think. Maybe you'll have a preference, and that's fair. It depends on what exactly you liked about the book. I don't think it'll shock anyone to hear that there's less science in the movie. They have to, like, gloss over some things that, in the book we spend time on. So if you're going to, like, really want that experience, you might be a little frustrated. Sure. Maybe there's a little more humor, or the humor's a little more front and center, or at least like focused on. But that's going to happen when you're condensing a big book into a smaller movie, where you're wanting to hit all these highlights, right? And so you're going to have a lot more, maybe like jokes per minute. The jokes per minute ratio is going to be higher. So like there's stuff like that happens in this movie. But man, I'm just so pleased with this adaptation. I thought it was excellent. And yeah, I went and saw it in IMAX. Beautiful film. This is a movie that I think everyone should go see. And I'm really heartened to see a movie like this doing well. I think we need movies like this right now that embraces science and embraces expertise, right? That shows that smart people who know what they're talking about can save us. I think that's a great message. And it's a heartwarming film. I think it's one that people can see with their family. And yet it's not boring. It's so exciting. It's so fun. I've seen a lot of rave reviews out there, and I agree. This is a great movie.
And you're saying like this is a good message in terms of story for this time period as well. It's also just good for movie theaters. It's good for people to go to the movies, have a spectacle to see. Tons of people are seeing this in IMAX.
I went and saw it at 6:30 on a Sunday evening in IMAX, and my theater was like almost sold out, I think.
Ours was packed 6:10 on a Sunday.
Yeah.
I was so excited, and it's like getting into that atmosphere with that audience and this kind of a film. Like it just feels important for the time. And this makes me think about like, the studio system looking at their films for the year, and like they have these tentpole films that are going to come out that are hopefully going to be these like big hits for them. And I think about that for our podcast too. Like we penciled this in such a long time ago, and this is like a tentpole Ink to Film project of like, we knew we were going to cover it. It's got such a following, it's such a beloved book. And now we're here with the film, and it's got like, Ryan Gosling, and Andy Weir is like so heavily involved, and like he's, collaborating and consulting on it in such major ways. And then like you see the full power of the marketing machine in effect with like every YouTube video is like them, talking about the science behind it and all this other stuff.
It's kind of a magical thing when the flood and onslaught of like marketing around a project hits for a movie that you really like.
Yeah.
Because when it's a movie you're kind of mixed on, you're like, oh, maybe we're overdoing it. Or if it's a movie you didn't like, you're like, oh my God, get this away from me. But when it's a movie you really love, like, man, it's just there's just so much out there right now. And we're going to be one more thing, I guess, in the feed. And maybe it'll be hard to get, located in there. But there's just so much good stuff. Like Andy Weir's doing interviews with an astrophysicist that I follow on YouTube. And like those interviews are so cool. And she interviewed Ryan Gosling, and it was really funny. He was just really charming, and like how much he like doesn't actually. He's like, I don't really know any of this, but engaging with it in good humor. It was very cool. And Adam Savage is doing stuff with Tested, where he's going on set and talking about all the things they had to make for it, and. Then I'm on Instagram and I'm getting all these, these different things. It's just like, it's everywhere, but I'm loving it because I'm loving this movie. I feel like this movie cements him now as a fan of Andy Weir in a way that The Martian couldn't, because The Martian was just one book. He had written one book that was like self-published through his blog, and it caught fire, and it was lightning in a bottle. And then you make this, like, it's adapted by Ridley Scott, so it's got this big name on it. And it does really well, and everyone was like, cool, Andy Weir had his moment. Now this happens, and everyone's going to look at Andy Weir and go, okay, this guy is a moneymaker. This guy is
hitmaker,
brilliant. He what's he got? Artemis, I think is almost certainly going to happen now because of the success of this. And whatever his next thing is, like, boom, that's going to get adapted immediately. That's going to get optioned. We talked about last week how some people call him kind of a modern Michael Crichton. And I saw that, so I mentioned that he didn't like that comparison, but it's not maybe for the reasons you might think. Like, it's not for any sort of reasons about Michael Crichton as a person or whatever. He says Michael Crichton was brilliant across many different kinds of subject matters. Like, he was a doctor. He was, really smart about all kinds of different things. Whereas, like, Andy really is focused on space travel. Like, that's the stuff that he loves. That's the stuff that gets him excited to write. Like I was hearing in that interview he did, he was showing all these spreadsheets he had for all the math he had done. He had calculated the like trajectory. He's doing rocket science literally for all these different things. And it was very important to him that it was realistic and that it got realistically portrayed. And he said, this is the stuff I'm most excited about. So like this is the reason he's ultimately writing these stories, and he just happens to be really good at the entertaining parts, but like he wants to explore the theoretical math behind this shit. That's really what's exciting him. And so he's going to continue, I think, to write space stuff. And man, if he's not one of the best space stuff writers out there right now because of that attention to detail, and I think he's just going to blow up even more.
I think so. And like a couple things. So Andy Weir also, like, he has a background in like coding and computer programming, and he worked on like Warcraft.
He used to work for World of Warcraft or Warcraft Blizzard. 2. And got fired. So we have Blizzard to thank for firing him, I guess. Launched his writing career.
I mean, when we've talked about Andy Weir, this is a moment that I would say, if you haven't checked out our last episode, check it out, because we talk about Andy Weir more in depth.
We also talk a lot about him in our Martian episode, which is years ago now, but if you search for it, you'll find it. I remember that being a good episode too.
And so, like, he is a concept-driven writer. Like, he thinks of concepts and then he builds character into it.
I'm the same, by the way. That's something I've talked about on panels and stuff. I approach writing the same way.
Yeah, but he wants to, like you're saying, he wants to like create a situation, figure out the math and the science behind it, and then throw characters into it.
Speculative idea is the seed for the story, and that's how I tend to approach it as well. And that's not as common. A lot of people begin with character, and I think that's maybe the most common answer if you ask writers that you'll hear.
Well, and Andy Weir is like very open. I heard him talking in interviews about like how he's like, character doesn't come naturally to me. He's like, I kind of build that in, and it's like that's the harder part for him.
Yeah.
And he talks about how like critics are like rightfully correct in the way that he like some of his characters can be a little more shallow than others and some of that kind of stuff. And he's like, I'm working on it. I continue to work on it, but it's something that like his critics may say, and he's like, yeah, I mean, it's not like something I'm not aware of. So
yeah, and I agree with that. I mean, like we talk about a lot of different writers and their strengths, right? Even within the genre space, someone like George R.R. Martin comes to mind, who is amazing at character. Yeah. He has so many different fully realized individuals in those books that are just incredible and compelling from the first line you read about them. That's not Andy Weir's strength. I mean, he's good at character, and I think maybe he's underselling it a little bit. But he's good at like certain kinds of characters, and he knows that. So you tend to see certain like archetypes showing up again and again. Mark Watney, Raylan Grace. There's a lot of shared DNA between these two people. I mean, I think they are different. They are distinct.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of shared DNA. And I wouldn't be surprised to see this character showing up again and again in his fiction.
Yeah, I think Watney's definitely way more like capable and like more sure of himself.
Confident to a fault almost. And yeah, that's not Raylan Grace.
Because he's kind of doubting himself for a lot of the story.
For a lot of it,
We're
yeah.
definitely going to jump into that. I do want to say too, like just in talking about this film generally, I love the handcrafted feel of this film. You can feel it in the DNA of the film as far as like the practical effects that they're using, the practical sets, puppetry, there's like miniatures being employed. There's all kinds of stuff that like makes this feel truly lived in. Such an amazing, like consistent visual style. I want to talk more about like Greg Fraser, the filmmakers, Greg Fraser, who's the cinematographer, Lord and Miller, who are the filmmakers, and we're going to get there. But at last like general things that you'd like to say about the film before we move on.
Yeah. And here it is. So this is our spoiler-free section, so some people might be listening to this who haven't seen the movie yet, maybe don't know anything about Project Hail Mary in general. One of the things I want to get across is that, besides everything I just said, this is a really incredible science fiction story that has a unique and, I would say, novel idea. Like, it is new. And the premise is executed so well. It is extremely believable, as much as you can say that about a story that takes such big swings and involves such big concepts. It reminds me of Three Body Problem in that way, but a completely different tone of a story, because this movie is ultimately, like, there's definitely thrills, there's bittersweet moments, sadness, but like overall this is like a positive feeling movie. This is a funny movie, and yeah, it'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry, like it'll do all the above, but like Three Body Problem is ultimately like a almost a horror sci-fi, and it's about like an invasion, and it's scary, and so it's a different tone. But like, as far as both of those projects, feeling like the creators found something seated in real science and yet felt new and felt like something that I hadn't seen before. I think both of them absolutely killed it. So if that sounds interesting to you at all, I think you should absolutely see this movie. And this is one where I think you could totally see the movie first. And then if you really like it, the book is there for you to provide more detail and to provide more, like you can really dive into these concepts and spend some time with them if that interests you. And I don't think there's going to be enough differences to where you're going to be like, oh, this is a completely different story, because it's very faithful, and I think you'll see some, and we'll get into them, but I think it's going to be familiar to you, and you'll be able to picture Ryan Gosling when you come into the novel, and that'll probably help. So like, yeah, I point people towards this book and think that they actually pair really well together, and you should see this movie if it sounds interesting to you at all.
To echo some of what you're saying, like it's such a, we talked about it last week, like it's so optimistic. It's this idea of like, and I talked about like our childhood growing up near the space program in Florida with the Space Coast and everything. So we talked about that a lot last week. And that's like, there's like a true optimism that I felt like I felt around sciences and NASA and space travel and all this stuff growing up that we're definitely harnessed and used, and like it's got just like so much heart, and the film absolutely like has all of that in spades as well. And like that's something that I want to express too, is that like some level of optimism is like too much escapism in some sense.
Yeah, it doesn't get to that like cloying or like overly sweet or saccharine space at all. I don't think. I don't,
but I think some people could feel that way, but generally I feel like it's like the perfect level of optimism, and it just like kind of gives you faith in humanity.
And right now we could all use a little bit more faith in humanity, right?
Yeah, the indomitable human spirit, like a spirit of cooperation and just like love, and like maybe there is like a true goodness to the universe and stuff. And so
that is what I've seen people saying, like one of the biggest suspensions of disbelief is just the idea that all the nations of the world would come together and cooperate on anything, even if it was an existential threat.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, that's like pretty accurate. But I'm an optimist for the most part, so I try to be positive. And I think this film absolutely like reflects a lot of that. And I had so much fun with it, and everybody I saw it with loved it. I saw it with my family. Right, my birthday's in a couple days, so it was like really for my birthday. It's getting to see this around that time.
Happy birthday, man! Yeah, by the time this comes out, your birthday will have passed. Everybody wish James happy birthday in the comments.
Yeah, appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, it's just cool to have all those things coincide at the same time and have it feel like this big moment for the story, and to be so moved by it, and to see, because I was a little worried with how dense the material could be and how much they had to cover in a 2.5-hour film, that like maybe audiences would find it difficult to grasp onto in some ways. But like, I'm here to say that everybody I saw it with loved it. My dad has a background, he has his degree in micro and molecular biology, so I was like, going into the film, I was like, Dad, you're gonna fucking love this movie. So I was so excited to like show it to him and get to like live vicariously through him getting to see it. So it's just, and then all the conversations we had after the fact, I was like, man, I wish I had recorded those conversations, because so much of that I need to talk about on the podcast now.
Yeah.
So hopefully I can bring all that stuff into this.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I got to see it with some friends, and it was a good time. But I think loved by all. There was a big Andy Weir head in the crowd of my friends who I think he was trying to kind of like go to bat for the book a little bit, but and I respect it. But he did like the movie as well. So yeah, it was definitely a well liked movie in my crowd.
All right, so let's move into talking about the filmmakers, some of the development of the film, and then we'll move into full spoilers. So for now, you're still safe for the most part. So Philip Anderson Lord and Christopher Robert Miller are an American filmmaking and acting duo. Their films are known for subversion of genre and detailed visual sensation, spanning various styles of live action and animation. They are known for co-creating the films Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, the Lego Movie, and the Spider-Verse film franchises.
Yeah, so a lot of like animated films. I guess I don't know Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Was that live action?
It was animated.
Was animated. Yeah. So is this their first like big live action movie?
No, but so we'll get into that. That was just kind of some of their bigger stuff. So they kind of started out co-creating, co-starring, and co-heading an adult animated sitcom called Clone High in 2002-ish. Massive cult following. Huge. Like, I've never seen it, and I kind of want to see it at this point, because I feel like I've seen so much of their other stuff, and I want to see kind of their beginnings. But I knew like it was on MTV at one point. There's like canceled. We can talk about like how it came about, but there was a revival a few years ago that came back after like 20 years. And it's like an animated show about like clone versions of like historic figures like Gandhi and Abraham Lincoln and all these other characters, and they're like out of high school, so it's them like it's an interesting concept.
That's a fun concept.
It definitely sets them up to kind of show their like humor and the things that they're into. And then they moved into live action with 21 Jump Street and 22 Jump Street.
Okay, I never saw either of those movies. So it's like they're like remakes of like an older movie, right?
Yeah, of the show, an old show.
The show. Yeah. Okay, yeah. I never saw any of them. They seemed like people liked them.
They were funny comedies for the time period. I thought they were pretty good, overall. Good. Like, they definitely, their voice is clear. Like, that you can see that even in those movies. They've also worked on a ton of other, like, they've directed and written an absolutely insane amount of stuff. They've produced and like the stuff that they're working on. As we get into their life here, you'll start to understand the magnitude of it. They worked on a couple of TV series, The Last Man on Earth, which was on Fox, Unkitty was on Cartoon Network, and The After Party was on Apple TV Plus a few years ago. Lord is from Miami and Miller is from Seattle. They both grew up making
Florida and Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, how about that?
Although I'm Florida born, so I'm both of those in one person, I guess.
Yeah. They both grew up making short films with an affinity for animation. They both attended Dartmouth College, where they first met and had separate comics in the school newspaper, the Dartmouth. During their time at Dartmouth, the school paper published a profile on Miller, which caught the attention of Michael Eisner, the then chairman of Disney. According to Lord, Eisner brought the profile to the attention of his fellow Disney executives, who offered to set up a meeting with Miller. Miller agreed to the meeting under the condition that he also bring Lord. After 3 months, the two moved to Los Angeles, and after one meeting, were offered a 2-year development deal at Walt Disney Television Animation.
That's cool, man. I would love to see someone bringing their friend with them. It's just cool to hear that actually worked. In this scenario, I
always think the idea of collaborating as creatives is so cool. Like, especially cool. Like helming a show or a film like this. Like, it just feels like it really could help to share the load in a sense. And like, as long as you have a connected creative vision, that's really awesome.
It's something you don't get as much of in the fiction space. You do see it sometimes, and it's something like I've always felt like I would like to do at some point in my career, just because I think it would be fun. But yeah, you have to like. I always think of Pacific Rim, and how you have the drift compatible people to be able to pilot the mech. Like, that's what I kind of think of if you're going to find a writing partner, is you kind of have to be drift compatible, and it's so hard to know if you're going to be like that with somebody. But if you can find it, I think magic can happen.
Definitely, yeah. So, though nothing they pitched made it to air, they produced the pilot to Clone High, which was subsequently dropped by Fox, and they wrote and produced on a series of sitcoms. MTV informed the duo that they were interested in purchasing a 13-episode season of Clone High. Although the show was met with acclaim, MTV canceled the series after hunger strike protests occurred in India over the show's portrayal of Gandhi as a motor-mouthed partier. In 2003, the two were tapped to write a screenplay for Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, their first feature film. After a year working on the script, they were fired for story issues and replaced with new writers, who after a year were fired themselves. Lord and Miller were rehired in 2006. The two completely redid the script, this time with the creative input of their crew. The two were almost fired again after Amy Pascal, the head of Sony Pictures at the time, criticized the film for a lack of story. Eventually, they would collaborate with Amy Pascal to build that story up some, and Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs was released in 2009 to positive reviews. So it did well. I remember when that came out. It did made a lot of money.
I read that book when I was a kid.
Did you? That'd be interesting to check out then. I've never experienced either.
Like, I feel like my memory of it's like a children's like picture book, basically.
I think so. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. So after that was released, they jumped over to 21 Jump Street, which was a live-action R-rated film. It released to critical acclaim and made some good money. So they did the 22 Jump Street as well. And then around that time, after the first one came out, Dan Lin, who was working with Warner Brothers, loved it and brought it to Warner Brothers, and they wrote and eventually directed their third feature film together, The Lego Movie, which was absolutely massive. I think it made $1 billion.
I've still never seen it.
It's good. It's solid.
Yeah, I don't know why. I miss a lot of animated films, honestly. Like, and I mean like the computer animation, a lot of that stuff I end up missing a lot of. But yeah, everything I heard, people really liked it, and
it's one of those things where it's like you feel like it's got a big toy brand associated to it. So they're like, oh, they're trying to do a Transformers thing, and
yeah, like, it feels a little gross almost. You're like, I don't know if I want to. Yeah.
But honestly, they subvert a lot of that, and it's really cool. They did it in a way of like what Barbie did with that kind of thing. They definitely navigated it well, and it was funny and it was cute. It was a good movie. So then around this time, they were working on a Flash film for Warner Brothers, but eventually dropped out of that.
Oh, like The Flash.
The Flash, yeah.
Gotcha.
They then dropped out of that project in favor of directing the then untitled Solo, a Star Wars story. So this is where the controversy really starts to pick up.
They did Solo?
For a while they did, yes.
Okay.
This was a really big story back then. So in January 2017, Lord and Miller began directing the Solo, a Star Wars story, which is, standalone story about Han Solo.
Mm-hmm.
On June 20th of 2017, it was reported that they had been fired from the project by Lucasfilm after over 4.5 months of filming and about 3/4 through principal photography. Lucasfilm announced that creative differences were the reason, with Entertainment Weekly reporting that Lord and Miller were going off script and trying to make the film into more of a comedy. They were unwilling to compromise with Lucasfilm and writer Lawrence Kasdan on the direction of the film, preferring their vision. 2 days later, Ron Howard was announced as the replacement to complete the film and reshoots. Lord and Miller received executive producer credits on Solo, a Star Wars story. So they filmed and created most of the film, and then like Ron Howard had to come in and like put it, like, I don't know, stitch it together with reshoots and all this other stuff and creative differences. Like there was a trend for a little while there in like the mid 2010s where I remember like the Edgar Wright stuff with Ant-Man and like, this with Star Wars, and like people splitting off due to creative differences. And honestly, when
even
I hear
like
that
Rogue
happening,
One had a lot of like a very complicated production and like
it had like definitely like heavy
reshoots
for sure. Yeah, Gareth Edwards did that one, and
yeah. So my thoughts on Solo were, I saw it much later because it didn't look that interesting to me. I saw it when it eventually came out, and I remember thinking it was fine, and then I've forgotten almost everything about that movie. So that should tell you something.
And I think that there's like, switching creative minds 3/4 of the way through a film,
That's
and
not
like
gonna,
all
yeah,
that
it's not a
sounds
recipe
like
for
it's going to
success
be
for sure.
Yeah, it's rough. So
yeah, I'm not going to hold that one against them.
They wanted to stick by their creative vision, and that's clearly why they left the project. And like they have a good reputation for like being able to create the thing. Like they have a vision in their mind and they want to create it in that way. A lot of people I think would argue that that version would have been really interesting to see. So, but in November 2017, Lord and Miller commented on their departure from it. Lord stated, "The experience of shooting the movie was wonderful. We had the most incredible cast and crew and collaborators. We're really proud of the work we did on the movie, and we wish everybody the best." And then Miller added, "As Phil said, we had such a great relationship with cast and crew. We were really rooting for them. After we took a much needed vacation, we got back into it, and we're writing and producing a sequel to the Lego Movie and producing a Miles Morales animated Spider-Man."
Yeah, so that's you're getting into the next big one, which is the Spider-Verse, right?
Yeah. So they're the creative, they're not the directors. They are the creative force behind the Spider-Verse films.
Okay, interesting.
Which multiple directors who've come through on that now, but they are really the people who are putting it together.
Incredibly well-written movie.
Awesome
I
films.
held out for a
Yeah.
long time watching it because I was just so sick of like Marvel everything.
Sure.
But I finally saw Into the Spider-Verse, and then
Across the Spider-Verse.
is that the
Yep.
whatever?
The first one's Into, the second one's Across.
Yeah. I saw the first one, and then I held out for a little while again, and finally saw the second one, and I thought it was really good too. Yeah, they're both really solid. Some of my favorite Marvel branded things that have come out, in a long time.
The animation style in that is really inventive and unique, and like
That's like some of the best stuff. Is just how fun and playful those movies are.
those movies are awesome. And I'm a massive Spider-Man fan.
Very cool.
Forever.
Are we getting like a
There's a third
Spider
one.
Noir coming out or something too?
Yeah. Live action, yeah. And I think they're like producers on that or something.
That's
and
wild.
I don't know how good that'll be. I have no idea. Who knows?
But it's Nicolas Cage.
Nick
who's gonna be
Cage,
in it,
yeah,
right?
Nick Cage.
Which means nothing about the quality. It could be amazing or it could be dog shit. You never know.
And they're like, you can watch it in color or in black and white. It's funny. It's kind of an interesting, I'm like, shoot it for black and white and just stick to that. Like, I know like it probably won't do as well, but yeah, you can't just like take something that's in color and turn it black and white and be like, this is noir. Look at that. Like, it's just different. But yeah, who knows how that's going to go. That's definitely like attached to this in some sense, because he was the voice in those animated movies. Yeah. And then, it's their first directing credit over a decade, because they produce on so many other things and write so many other things, and they're like show running, and they're running the show as far as the Spider-Verse and everything, but not directing.
So this is probably a note you're going to get to, but I heard Ryan Gosling say that this was an early get for him. Like, he wanted this project. I think Andy Weir wanted Ryan Gosling, and I don't know if it's like his production company or something optioned it. So I'm curious about that. Like, if Ryan Gosling was the one who sought this out and wanted it, at what point did they get brought in?
So I think that Weir had a really unique scenario here, which we don't hear a lot of authors have, where after the success of The Martian and when he was going to option this film, he had some say. He was in the room when they're deciding, Ryan Gosling. I think I believe, from what I heard, he sent a manuscript of this before it was even published to Ryan Gosling, and like kind of had him in mind. Possibly, some people have pointed out like R.G., Ryland Grace, Ryan Gosling.
Yeah.
There's some interesting stuff with that.
Yeah, that's legit. Yeah. I believe it.
So, I mean, that could just be a coincidence, but there's some idea that maybe he had a Ryan Gosling type in his mind.
Yeah, I think he said as much.
And he said that he was involved in the process of picking Lord and Miller, and like even the writer Drew Goddard.
Well, there was one part in the book where this guy's like, have I always had like these muscles and these abs and stuff? And he's like thinking about like how much of a specimen he is. So I think it's a little credence to the idea that he might have been picturing Ryan Gosling in the role.
Definitely, yeah. Ryan Gosling came on as like a producer as well, so he's like heavily involved in the creation of the film from like top to bottom. He's a star. And Drew Goddard was also somebody, I believe that he was working on another film, and or a show or something, and they waited for Drew Goddard to become available to write the screenplay, because he was the one who wrote the screenplay for The Martian. So he returned here to write the screenplay for
that name's familiar,
Project Hail Mary. Yeah, I mean, he also worked on like Cloverfield. He wrote the scripts for Cloverfield, Cabin in the Woods, World War Z. Bad Times at El Royale. Back in the day, he wrote for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Lost, Daredevil, the Daredevil
Big
show
name.
on Netflix. So he loved the book, and he wanted to be involved as well. As soon as obviously he had already previously worked with Weir, and they from what I was able to understand, Goddard was sending stuff to Weir and getting notes from him and all that, so they were able to collaborate along the way. And Goddard was saying he's like, I let Weir do the science stuff and tell me all that stuff, and then I just like from a character perspective and put the narrative together in a lot of ways. So
smart.
It's pretty cool to hear like how involved Weir was, and then the fact that it's worked out in the way that it has. Because sometimes some writers aren't the best filmmakers or producers or consultants and all that kind of stuff. But like it sounds like this whole collaboration between all these people definitely. I mean, I know it worked out, but it sounds like it was also pretty harmonious.
Yeah, that's from what I've heard too. I saw that he was on set a ton. Like literally helping them explain some of these concepts to Ryan Gosling, like explaining like how this works. And, that hands-on approach is really cool when the author demonstrates that they are able to like not be like control freaks about everything. You have to be someone people want to work with.
Right.
And it seems like he's not like that kind of like prima donna in that sense. And yeah, it just seems like he works well with other people.
And I mean, you can see from the interviews that he does as well, like this movie is significantly changed, and there's a lot of things that are very important to Weir, you can tell in his writing, that are not necessarily in the film, and he's cool about the changes. He's like, things have to change.
Yeah.
And he says that in the interviews and stuff. So it's like you said, it's matching exactly what you're talking about. So for Lord and Miller, future projects that are coming up for them, they are working on that third Spider-Verse film. They are also developing a project based on the Bobaverse, which I've heard a ton of people talk about, from author Dennis E. Taylor.
Oh, yeah, I think I have heard of this. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess people say if you like Project Hail Mary, you'll love Bobaverse as well. So
it's about a character named Bob, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're working on that potential adaptation. They're also working on an Archie Comics possible adaptation. And then finally, Phil and Chris Miller are still actively developing a film adaptation of Andy Weir's novel Artemis.
Yeah, that's what I had heard, that they were working on Artemis as well. Yeah, that seems like that's going to happen now.
I mean, they've gotten far enough along too that they're like, it's alive and in development. There was been years where it was kind of put on the back burner, but the script is supposedly delightful. The main hurdle that they're talking about is like finding ways to film the scenes, because I guess it's like a moon-based
It's a moon,
film.
yeah.
Yeah, and they want to film with the gravity, which is like I think 1/6 Earth's gravity, and like depicting that.
I heard that too. They're like trying to do a bunch of they're trying to do it for real in like these vomit comet settings. It's wild stuff.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. Like, it's so crazy that actors do that. Like, I know for was it Apollo 13, they did that a bunch for that.
You can do it for like certain sections and stuff, but you can't do it for the whole film. But even here, like some of the zero-G stuff here, it looks excellent. And like, again, practically done. It's not like a CG environment. Like, they're using like different rigs and, wires and stuff to make it, and it looks really realistic. He's like flipping around and like zipping through the ship at times.
There was one scene in particular that I don't think it's a spoiler, but it's transitioning from zero-G to gravity. And the way they shot that, and he like kind of comes in sideways and lands, and then like the stuff that like falls. Like, I assume a lot of this stuff is probably CGI, but just the body movement that he did was so convincing, and I felt like I'd never seen that before. I don't know, that looked really cool. So that had to do with like, it was like a spinning up thing was happening.
Yeah, centrifugal thing.
Yeah.
The other person I want to talk about, we talked about Drew Goddard, the filmmakers here with Lord and Miller. Greg Fraser is the cinematographer. We've talked about Greg Fraser quite a few times on this podcast. He's an Australian cinematographer. He received a Best Cinematography Academy Award for Dune, and he was nominated for Dune Part 2, as well as The Lion.
Quick aside about Dune. Dune Part 3 trailer played before this
slaps.
one for me.
Yeah, dude, it's awesome.
So
I can't wait.
Oh my God.
I cannot wait to watch that movie, dude. That chant is, my God, Hans Zimmer,
good.
dude.
I've been sending you TikToks about that, man. It's so good. And it really is Chalamet doing it too.
Yeah,
which is crazy.
So cool. Anyway, so he shot this. He shot The Batman, Matt Reeves' The Batman, which I thought was just incredibly well shot for like a superhero film like that. So stylized.
I really like him. Yeah, he's up there. I would say, like, the Dune movies. Come on, some of the best looking movies there are.
When we talk about the more of the look and some of these specific scenes, like some of the ingenious ways that they were filming them were just fascinating to me as a camera person. Like, I'm just like, this guy's fucking awesome. The stuff that he creates and the fact that so much of it is practically done, it just blows my mind. It's awesome.
There was a lot of stuff around in the production of this where they were talking about like not using any green screens or blue screens and stuff, and then like later they had to kind of walk it back because it was like maybe getting a little oversold.
No, so Phil or Chris, one of them said like there's no CG used in this film, basically, is what it was like saying. But like there's CG augmenting happening, but there's aspects of the film that are like practically done, and that on its own is impressive. And then a lot of the things that you're seeing, like maybe even that zero-G sequence that goes from zero-G to like gravity, that was probably mostly practically done, and then obviously the wire work involved with that and everything. But they have to remove the wires and stuff with CG. There's plenty of that kind of stuff that goes on, and touching up of faces and all kinds of stuff like that. So
take all that with a grain of salt whenever you hear that.
Yeah,
for sure.
But they really did build these sets. Like, it's not on a volume. It's not the blue screen stuff. Like most of the spaceship and all that stuff that you're seeing, maybe the Windows green screen, but because they're not in space.
Yeah, but like the backgrounds are all sets that they built. Yeah.
Correct, yeah, and they shot on like a lot of black like void kind of sets and stuff.
Random aside before I forget it, talking about this kind of thing, and it was Adam Savage was touring the set for the ship, and he told an anecdote about how James Cameron told him that he wanted to build a life-size working Titanic for the film The Titanic, and the production company was like, no, that's too expensive. So instead, they spent twice as much money as it would have cost to build the Titanic to make a CGI Titanic.
I mean,
and I just think that that's a hilarious thing. I could totally see that happening, right? You know, like, oh, that's going to cost too much money, but like the CGI stuff can get really expensive really fast. And I just love the idea that they spent twice as much money as it would have cost to actually just build the Titanic again.
Especially at that time period. Like, that's what was so expensive, and wild. I didn't know that. That's cool. So this is a good time. I think we can start to transition into talking about spoilers and plot and stuff. One more thing I do want to note. The film is selling like absolutely
doing
crazy.
great.
The box office has been amazing for it. It's like a massive, big budget, original sci-fi success.
Yeah, which
in
just
a way
as
that,
a sci-fi fan, I'm very excited to see that.
It's not a franchise film. It's an original concept. Obviously, it's an adaptation, but like seeing people be this excited for a film like this is so cool to see. And I think it's like setting box office records for. I know like this is like an Amazon. So Amazon bought MGM, who created this film.
Hate that, but.
I don't like that at all.
Yeah.
I did not love that.
It
Amazon's
like a
logo
weird
at the
blend of
beginning
Amazon and MGM at the start.
Yeah.
I was like, what is this?
I didn't like that. I don't like seeing the big five get absorbed, but they're all going at this point. It's crazy. But anyway, they, this is their best performing film to date. And I think it could be in the contention so far of the year. It's definitely one of the highest earners and could be by the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, we got some big ones coming out later this year, so it'll be interesting to see when it's all said and done, the dust settles. So before we get into our spoiler section, we did want to point you all to our Patreon. It's patreon.com/inktofilm, and on there we have bonus episodes that we put out every month. We also, that's going to be how you're going to be able to vote on upcoming projects. You be a patron, there'll be dedicated polls for that. We'd love to have your support over on Patreon.
Yeah, and we super appreciate our patrons. Like anything you can do to help us, it helps maintain the format of the show in its current state. So if you like it, please consider helping us out. So we're going to jump into plot now. I'm going to read 3 sections. The first one, this is your spoiler warning. We are going to spoil everything. From this point forward, assume that we're going to talk about all the major spoilers.
Right.
Last warning, and the plot begins. Ryland Grace awakens from a coma on a spacecraft. Initially erratic with retrograde amnesia, Grace discovers that he is the sole survivor of the 3 crew on board, and that he is light years away from Earth in a distant star system. Grace slowly remembers that he is a middle school science teacher and former molecular biologist. In the past, scientists observed the sun dimming, coinciding with the formation of an infrared line from the sun to Venus called the Petrova line. The dimming, caused by a microorganism known as astrophage, exponentially increasing its population on the sun's surface, will result in a catastrophic global cooling of Earth within 30 years. Government agent Eva Stratt recruits Grace and other scientists to study astrophage. Grace discovers that astrophage is a cell which is impenetrable to any form of electromagnetic radiation, and that it breeds on Venus via the planet's carbon dioxide and energy from the sun. Researchers also find astrophage to be a very effective but volatile fuel source. It has infected other stars within our solar neighborhood. Stratt discloses Project Hail Mary, a plan to send a crew on a suicide mission to Tau Ceti, the only undimmed nearby star. The Hail Mary spacecraft only has enough astrophage as fuel for a one-way trip, but will carry probes to send the crew's findings back to Earth.
Yeah, man, what a cool opening to this. I'm so glad that they kept the sort of dual narratives of him in space and the flashbacks. It feels like that was an essential part of the story, and I was wondering if they were going to be able to keep it, and I really like the way they approached that. This is one of the parts where if you're a big fan of the book, you might be a little surprised at how quickly we move through some of this opening, how he's
I was
not,
worried, honestly.
having to figure out using math and like observations about gravity that he's even in space at all. Like that whole part gets, he flies right through that.
I was also just worried for people who hadn't read the book. I was like, are they going to pick up on what's happening? Because we were zooming through that stuff.
Yeah.
At such a clip that I was like, I knew what was happening and I still felt like I was missing things. So I was like, wait, there may be like a line somewhere where it's like, oh, who am I? He writes it on a whiteboard. And then he's like, I know that that's an electromagnet. How do I know that? That's an electromagnetic, scanner or something.
But yeah, I agree. It's like, is it clear that these are memories and that as he experiences them, he's getting them back? I was wondering if that was going to be the case, but it seemed like people were following it.
I think people got it, and I think there's enough context that you get as it goes. You can like retroactively kind of realize that. But at first, like it was the first like 3 minutes. He's already climbing the ladder. He didn't need to remember his name or any of that kind of stuff.
Out, yeah. A lot of good physical comedy though, and I saw Gosling say that he studied silent film, like famous silent film,
Chaplin.
Charlie Chaplin and stuff like that for like how they would move their body around and like that kind of physical storytelling. And I think he did a great job with that. And this was the first introduction to this version of Ryland Grace that he performs as. And I think this version of Ryland Grace is a little bit more of a, as I said here in my notes, Goblin Man.
Especially this version of him. He's got the long hair and the beard and everything. And funny enough, I heard him talk about this part too, about like him being zipped inside that suit, and they like apparently they filled it with goo, and you can't see it on screen, but he's like, it was really uncomfortable, and they wanted me to feel like I was being born, and like it doesn't play on screen, but it's like there's a bunch of goo inside that little cocoon he's in.
That's funny. I don't remember that. I don't think I saw that. But he does slurp out of it onto the ground and like flop around like a fish, so that's kind of funny.
Yeah, it was funny. And it, in the book, there's like a bunch of stuff about how he's got like a rectal tube in and like a catheter and all this other stuff. And like I think there's like
he just pulls the one out of his throat. That's the only one.
Cables hanging off of him and stuff. And so like for it's just funny that like they put enough in there for the book readers that you can like kind of see.
Yeah.
And that's throughout the film. There's many times that like they put the context for things that happen in the book, but they don't explain it. Mm-hmm. So like the eagle-eyed book readers like have some of that. Not always, but for some of those things.
Yeah. But I mean, he figures out he's in space, has his like freaked outs about it. He's trying to figure out who he even is. It's just a cool way to start the story, and we immediately jump into the flashbacks, though, and we start seeing him as a school teacher, and we get a little more, or at least slightly different, perhaps, interactions with his class, as he's like not wanting to explain astrophagia to them, but he ends up explaining to them anyway. And yeah, I mean, this all works well, and I think sets the character up in a way that is immediately engaging.
Yeah, I would have preferred to see the class come back a couple more times, because like that was such a big thing where he kept thinking about the kids so often, like, I got to do this for the kids. But like it was effective because like, these kids are like, I heard the world's ending and da-da-da, and like you can understand how terrifying that would be to try to tell children. And
yeah, slight difference, because in the book they were like they find out that the world might be like ending in like 30 years, or not ending, but like it'll be like half the people will die in 30 years. And in the book the kids are like, oh, that's that's so far away, that's forever away, they're not even going to worry about that. But maybe they felt like that didn't play as well or something, because these kids definitely seem more concerned about it.
So you mentioned one of the things that I think a lot of people are that read the book are going to respond to, and that's that like we have so much less, and this is even getting into his like experiments with astrophagia and everything, like so much less of like the hard science that Andy Weir is so known for.
Yeah.
How is that like kind of hitting you?
For me, I'm fine with it, because I have the book. I read the book. And that, to me, like I know that kind of material is going to work better there. And the only way you're going to get that in a project like this is if it is a mini series, maybe instead of a film. But in a film, like that stuff's going to get cut, and like I had already made my peace with that going in, knowing, because like same thing happened in The Martian, right? And in many ways, this book had even more. So there was just even more that was going to end up getting condensed or cut. And I was still impressed with how much of it they were able to keep in, honestly.
I figured what was going to happen is they were going to cut out a bunch of the experiments, but still have like some really significant ones that hit for that hard science audience. And there is like one with the lights and the box that they create and all that stuff with the Home Depot sequence. Yeah,
so he has these interactions with Carl, who's played by Lionel Boyce.
Yes,
from The Bear, who I'm a fan of from that show.
The pastry chef from The Bear.
Yeah, really good. I really liked this. This is like, there is kind of a secret agent character, or not a secret agent, but like a agent character that he notes is like more friendly and that he's able to talk to. But definitely not as explored as it is in the movie here. I like their relationship. I thought it was really, really cool.
Definitely, they brought a lot really of personality to that character, right?
When they go to the Home Depot to go shopping, it's like.
And he's got the expense account and all that stuff. It's just great. And I heard that the actor like improvised the slam dunk into the cart, and that made it into the film. So that's something else to note, is that like Lord and Miller liked that kind of improvisation on their sets. So like when they'll throw lines at actors, and Gosling is doing a fair amount of that throughout. And there's a few like genuine moments, and I think there is a magic to it. Like I don't know. I think some people get like a bad rap for the whole movie's improvised and it's this and that, and they're just like the lines are made up on set and like going off script and all this stuff. But like there are moments where you can feel the magic of it when like he's having a real reaction, and like I think we're gonna get to some more of that. But just knowing that like those moments where there's some improvisation there that led to a character being expanded that's something that you'd like to see in a film.
Absolutely.
And I did want to note, with us talking about like the pacing too, I do think it starts to hit its rhythm once it kind of sets up the premise and we start going into the flashbacks. It does start to fall into a nice pace. Before that, I was like, oh, this is breakneck pace. This might be too much to try to adapt in a single movie.
It slows down a little.
It falls into it a little bit. And honestly, through the film, it was like a 2.5 hour, 2 hours and 40 minute film. I felt like it was short. When I got out, I was like, that felt like it was like an hour and a half. So it all worked very well for me.
Yeah.
I don't know how that hits people who hadn't read the book.
Yeah.
But just personally, I was like, this is really greatly paced, and I would have watched like a 4-hour cut of this if I needed to.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not the best person for this kind of stuff. I think I'm not as sensitive to movie length as some other people, perhaps. I tend to enjoy even like longer, slower films. So yeah, I thought this was paced well. I agree. I thought it flew by. Yeah, no complaints here. I wanted to ask you. So we have Ava Stratt and what's her name, Sandra Hüller, or if that's how you say her name, portraying her on screen. Pretty similar to the book version, with some differences, especially in like how she, the relationship that forms with Ryland. What did you think of this version of Ava Stratt?
I thought she was pretty different, honestly. Like, she's like similar in a lot of ways, but I thought she
in the way that she commands a room, maybe there's like certain things I'm saying that are pretty similar. But yeah, they definitely give her like more backstory and yeah. What are your differences you're identifying, I guess?
In the book, I felt like she was like a cold, sort of like dictator, utilitarian, like this is for the mission, like I have no time for anything else. And
even more ruthless. Yeah,
so much more humanity here, and like a more like in a way a much more believable character, because I think a character like this would be struggling with this. And at the end of the film, or at the end of the book, there's like a comeuppance for Stratt for all the things that she does, and like red tape that she cuts through and everything that possibly happens, and or she knows that at the end of this there may be something coming.
Yeah, she predicts that it will. Yeah.
Here, I just didn't get the sense that she was really a rule breaker. I felt like she was powerful, and she was like sort of the go-to person that was like in charge of all of this, but I didn't see her as like a my way or the highway, to the point that like I'm gonna face court-martial, not even, but like just a courtroom that's gonna like hold me accountable for crimes against humanity or something like.
Yeah, well, there's several things that get omitted that she okays in the book, and so that's one of the reasons why.
And we can talk about that. We talked about it last week. There's like some ecological like impacts that they have to do.
So
right?
They decide to nuke Antarctica in the book, to melt a bunch of ice and cool the Earth, warm the Earth up,
releasing
in
methane,
order to counteract the cooling that's happening. And they recognize that this is like a terrible thing to have to do. But she ends up doing it just like kind of like the measures that were necessary to save the planet. And then also there's a part where they like basically put these like solar panel like devices over like a third of the entire Sahara Desert, which like wrecks a big ecosystem as well. So there's several things like that we get into in the book that she ends up okaying that I think are, when she's talking about like someone's going to be held accountable for this, I think it's some of those choices that she's touching on.
Those are things that'll be, there's ramifications for that forever.
And she's like, I'm going to be the fall guy for this. Yeah, they're going to blame me for it. Yeah.
But it's better than the world ending, basically. Right. Is like, this is their last ditch efforts they're trying to do.
I still think that's within this character that we see on screen. We just don't get this part of it. But I think I could totally see her still saying like she's fine with that.
And obviously the other major difference that I was picking up on that my dad actually asked me about, he's like, do they get together? Because there is like there's sort of an attraction, I think you can perceive between these two characters. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like lingering eyes and respect, mutual admiration, that kind of stuff that like could be gleaning into possible romance if there was time or a different circumstance.
I've heard that outlined as a complete change, but I think that there is a touch of that in the book, because there was a line where I forget who it is. It's one of the other scientists who are like working on the Project Hail Mary. But they say like, oh, we assumed you and Stratt were sleeping together. And like people assumed that about them too. So there's an implication that they must be close, and people see them together all the time. And so maybe at least people thought that could be the case. And yes, the movie like definitely fully extrapolates that out. Not to say there is an actual physical relationship, but there's definitely some like flirtatiousness happening. And then there's a big scene which we haven't got to yet, but the karaoke scene definitely leans into some of that.
Yeah, I mean we can talk about that now too. She like. And I don't dislike those changes. Those are just noticeable changes. Those are things that feel different. But her singing the song, and like I want to talk about this because of the meta nature of it. So apparently the actor Sandra Hüller, there was like this idea that her character could have a karaoke scene, and they were like, what song would you want to sing? So she actually like brought this song because she likes to sing in the car with her daughter, and she asked her daughter, like, is this song still cool? Do you think that I should do this? And her daughter said yes. So she brought it to Lord and Miller and Gosling and said, this is the song I want to sing. And so she chose that song, and then the marketing for the film,
Harry Styles' Sign of the Times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the marketing team used that as like, it's kind of the calling card of the film now. Like it's like iconic to the film.
Yeah, I would say it's like the main song. It was prominent in the first trailer, which is, really good. Really
Gosling sang it in front of Harry Styles at SNL.
Did he really? That's fun.
Yeah, like when he hosted recently. So yeah, it's like integral to this film at this point too. And it's a cool song for this movie, and the trailer, it hits so hard in the trailer.
I like the song, man. I'm not a Harry Styles fan, but once I heard this song in that trailer, I immediately sought it out because I was like, oh, this is a good song.
I like it a lot, yeah. But that's cool that like she got that scene, and like it was that moment of like no one can believe that she's singing, and she's like, this is what I'm doing it for though. Like she's like, I'm willing to do anything because it's the idea of saving humanity, so we can have these joyful moments and like these human moments of showing vulnerability and being there for one another. And
it's an assertion of humanity too. Yeah, it's like I'm fighting for humanity, and so I'm not going to be reduced to being this cold, inhuman figure. I'm going to demonstrate that I am also a human. Yeah,
which is a refutation of kind of what I thought she was in the book. So that's kind of the film saying she's not that character.
It's like, or she is that in some settings, but she's not like that all the time. And I think Ryland goes to her when they're having that conversation on the deck, and he's like, yeah, I guess you're not really someone who's gonna partake in karaoke, are you? And she's like, actually I am. Like I am a good singer, I used to sing when I was in school and like stuff like that. I think she likes kind of going against expectations in that way. So
what did you think of, because we've gotten to the point where like they've seen a Petrova line, they're experimenting with the astrophage. There's the funny moment where he's like getting to interact with the astrophage for the first time. There's like a panel of like world leaders.
There was a lot of funny stuff in the lab. I love the parts where he's talking to them and he's like, I guess I'm expendable, aren't I? You don't care if I die. And she like turns around and looks at all the other people in the room and she's like, it is agreed that we would prefer you not die or something like that. Like
he's like, why do you guys have to talk about it? He's like, why is that a thing that you're doing?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of good stuff with that. And then he like kills the astrophage very early and like sees that it's transparent and he's like, it's life. And then they process it and he's like, it's got water in it. And he's bummed. And so
good. Right out of the book.
How it was visually depicted, like I thought the astrophage looked great.
Yeah.
I thought
little
black dots. And then you saw it when it pops and like that was a good visual kind of thing that they call back to later when you can see them dying. And yeah, it's an important thing that like you have to translate all of these dense ideas to something that's like visually identifiable, even if you have the movie, the sound off basically. Like you need to, that's the kind of like some of the techniques that people will say is like, you hope that somebody's not watching it with the volume off, but if they were, you want it to be both audio and visual to like represent kind of what's happening so people can follow it, like the context of everything. And that's important for a film like this because like I say, people may not understand the science of how things are happening, but if they see it happening and someone and it's like clear that there's some sort of definable visual element, then like they can follow along with it. And I think that's part of it. Like even if you and this is something that I think if you haven't read the book, repeat viewings are probably going to pay off in a lot of different ways. That like this is like kind of a dense, like rich film that has a lot to it in terms of like substance and what's going on and what people are saying and how things are interacting with others. And I thought they did a good job pulling all that off and making it still feel like Andy Weir's work.
I agree. Let's move back to the ship though. I love the design of this thing. They changed it a little bit. They added it felt like they added a few more rooms. One in particular, I think most notably, is this like virtual bay that they added, where he can go and be surrounded by all these screens that like show the sun or show forest or show beach. That ends up becoming important here in a bit, but like, I remember thinking like this is such a movie thing to do, but it works, I think, and I like the way they ended up using it. And at times it would kind of be like a gateway for him into memories too.
Yeah, totally. And I heard the filmmakers talk about this and say like, this was something that they noticed in the book was so much of was talked about how like the characters could go insane over 4 years if they had, if they were, in a situation where they couldn't escape her. And this was their solution to that, and also offering something visual and like all this other stuff.
Yeah, we talked about that isolation and what it does to the human mind. Yeah. And, stuff like this would help for sure.
They call it like the don't go crazy room or something like that. I think that's what they dubbed it. And then also like later, there's a couple characters who, we're getting there, but like that actually play like Sonic the Hedgehog, like in that dome.
Oh,
and there was like
hilarious.
a whole sequence where they played it together, but they cut that scene. And apparently there's a ton of cut scenes. They said that there was like initially like a 4 or 5 hour cut of the film. And they're like, it'll never see the light of day because it wasn't like a movie. Like it was just like scenes. That
filmed. And some of that stuff gets cut.
Yeah.
For good reason.
But it's cool that like there's so much extra stuff, especially because of the improv and stuff.
Yeah, you would hope maybe they'll release some of these as like bonus features on an eventual,
that'd be cool.
Blu-ray or something. Speaking of that other character, though, we got to move into the next part because I'm dying to talk about Rocky.
Yeah, it's time. So in the present, as Grace approaches Tau Ceti, he sees an alien spacecraft. The spacecraft, which docks with the Hail Mary, is made of xenonite, solid xenon. The pilot of the other ship is a rock-like 5-legged alien from 40 Eridani, whom Grace names Rocky, after the Iridian's body and Rocky Balboa. Grace deduces that Iridians see via echolocation and creates a machine translation system for Rocky's musical speech. Rocky explains that he is a mechanic and also the sole survivor of a mission to stop the astrophage. Neither can survive in the other's atmosphere, so Rocky enters the Hail Mary using a small pressurized ball as a spacesuit. In the past, Grace meets the commander, engineer, and scientists for Hail Mary along with their backups. While handling astrophage, a mishap kills the scientists and backup 3 days before launch. With no time to train a replacement, Strat requests that Grace takes the place of the deceased scientists. When Grace refuses to go, Strat has him drugged and forcibly put on Hail Mary.
Yeah, and that's a big twist in both book and movie. But let's back up and talk about the introduction of Rocky. Really fun. I really liked the way the ship was portrayed. And then their little like cat and mouse game they play was funny, where they're kind of going back and forth, and then the whole like throwing things at each other and the spacewalks. Like, there's just a lot of fun gags here that don't take away from the seriousness of the moment, but I think just add a nice levity to these moments. And like I think on a rewatch, when you know about Rocky and you know who he is, these will be even more fun. It's
so fun. I mean, this is the heart and soul of the film, right? This is such a major thing that they had to nail. First of all, Rocky looks incredible. It's a practical puppet that they use, and so there's an awesome story about this. Rocky is puppeted by James Ortiz. There's a lot of like preliminary stuff that they were doing to like create the design of Rocky and then to use Rocky and interact with Ryan Gosling's Ryland and like how that interaction was playing and doing chemistry tests and stuff. And then eventually they just kind of saw James Ortiz as not only the puppeteer but also the voice of Rocky.
Mm-hmm.
So he's doing both of those things. And there's also there's a full team called the Rocketeers. There's 6 people who are puppeting Rocky all at the same time. So James Ortiz is the main puppeteer and voice. And then there's also this team that are all manipulating this creature that Gosling as an actor gets to interact with in this space. And this is that level of improvisation that comes in, and these moments of like him saying something or doing something that is a genuine reaction versus like if it was a CG, a tennis ball that he had to look at, and they're not able to do the physical sort of reactions and have that sort of interplay. And like James Ortiz talked about it, like it was just him and Ryan Gosling in a ship for months at a time, and like they were the only 2 people, so they like built up this good chemistry together, and like they really were like represented like the heart of the film, and they were able to play off each other in such a great way, and man did it work. And I just like every bit that I liked Rocky, I liked him here. I mean, I think there's some changes. I think they do a fair amount of making him more of a comedic character than he was in the book. He was funny in the book for sure, but he was also like a genius, and he seemed like he was less of a genius here. It was like more Grace was able to figure out all the genius things, and he's like a good builder and a good engineer, and he has xenonite. But ultimately, like, the relationship absolutely works. All the scenes with them together. One of the things I said in the book episode, I was like, you just want them to hug so bad, and they fucking do it in the movie. I was like, they did it. They hugged.
It's very cool.
And like it was such a great moment. And I'm like, oh my god, that's like everybody wanted that to happen.
Good. Fist my bump, man.
Yep.
Love that.
So funny.
Love that. I love that puppetry is coming back. Hopefully people see this and realize that there is something truly special about that and being able to physically interact with something. And, we've come full circle on the CGI, fully CGI characters. They have their place and they have their things, but they have limitations, they have weaknesses, and there are strengths to having a physical object. And I think this absolutely shows that. Very cool. And I love the way the ball was portrayed that Rocky gets into and rolls around in. I thought it was just all very well done. And yeah, they were able to get into a lot of hijinks together. And when he's first kind of just comes like ripping into the ship, and he's, oh, this is all so messy. Why is it so messy? And all this stuff. It's just so funny.
Dirty.
Yeah.
So another thing too is just like there are moments of contact, them starting to interact and speak, like learn each other's speech and all that other stuff was so cool.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of Easter eggs. There's one like as they're figuring out the voice, the one that everybody understands, which is the Meryl Streep one voice that's used for a moment, and that was actually again a good moment of like just improvisation. Like they got that recording and they dropped it on Ryan, and that was his true reaction of him being like, she really can do everything. She can do anything.
Yeah, I heard
like that was a true reaction.
Cool story, man. I love it.
And then also one of the voices that they're flipping through is Ray Porter, voice of Rocky in the audiobook that we raved so much about last week.
Cool.
So he got the cameo in the film.
That's awesome.
Rocky.
Yeah, there's so much good stuff in there. One thing I will note about the Rocky Ryland communications is how much this does get condensed. So if you are one of the people who feels like, wow, they really do figure out how to communicate with each other really quickly, and like it's not long before they're having full conversations with each other. A lot of this stuff takes longer in the book. We walk through the process more of developing a shared language, and there is a big plot point in the book about Ryland figuring out in the first place that Rocky does not have sight, that he like basically only interacts with the world through hearing and touch, I think, but like he doesn't have sight and he doesn't have smell. And these are big plot points. This is just like stated from the jump. Like Ryland immediately understands this about Rocky in a way that I was like, oh, come on. But ultimately, it's just one of those things we don't have time to fully explore. We also see this like tremor sense vision, which I wasn't the biggest fan of, I'm going to admit. I get why it's there. I think you need to like show the audience something to visualize so people can like maybe picture how Rocky's interacting with the world. But like, I don't know, it feels a little like of a concession
Daredevil?
to me of like, we're gonna show you a visual thing to communicate what it's like to experience the world in a non-visual way.
Totally. And I like the idea of perception. Like that's the strength of what the book does is like, it's such a cool way that they dole out the information because you are realizing like, oh yeah, I'm reading a book. I can't see the character. If he doesn't have eyes, that's a whole thought process that you get to go through now where they haven't looked up at the stars for generations and wanted to space travel. And there's so much context that adds. And it's such a perspective shift that like you start to think of yourself in that scenario of like, how would I be different if I didn't have this sense?
Yeah.
And like that is something that here, when you see the character right away, you're like, oh, well, he doesn't have eyes on him. So I guess he doesn't see. And they just like flip through that pretty quickly. The Rocky vision stuff I thought was like, I understand why you do that in terms of making it easy to digest.
Yeah, they even give him a little gun that he can point at stuff and like see it.
Yeah, well, he does have that he has that in the book. He's able to like look at his screens and stuff. He's able to tactile have a way to like turn a visual stimulus into a touch stimulus. It's like kind of braille like in the book.
Right. Yeah, I do remember that. Okay.
So the perception thing, like I like the idea that like we couldn't even fathom how well Rocky could hear and like how that would manifest in terms of his perception of being able to see and manipulate with the world.
I like the way that was portrayed in the movie with the logs, which by the way serve a lot of different purposes. But one of the things that they do is prevent us from needing to do voiceover, which I have to give this movie props because I think it's a real temptation whenever you're doing any adaptation is to do voiceover, and there certainly would have been the temptation here to do it. But I love that this movie doesn't have any. I think it's stronger for it, and I think these logs provide the necessary sort of exposition that we need, but also can provide like a lot of good comedy, like when Ryland's trying to talk and he's like whispering and he's like, you certainly can't hear me right now, and it's like, oh, I can.
He's like, I need a break, I'm going crazy, this guy doesn't respect my space.
Yeah.
And then he's like, can't hear you, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's good. One thing that I wanted to know too, you talked about the ships before. I think the design is very cool. I like that they were able to do something kind of unique and something that we hadn't seen from like an alien civilization and vessel before. And then I also wanted to mention in terms of the Hail Mary, I saw in my research that they made a Lego set that you can buy for Project Hail Mary. And I'm like, really, it's like, I have it pulled up. I'm considering buying it, but it's the ship and there's a little Ryland and there's a little Rocky Lego.
Hell yeah.
And I'm like, that's so fucking cool.
They made I saw this on TikTok. There was like some sort of public exhibit where they had Rocky and his little like ball, and you could walk up and interact with it and like talk with you and go fist my bump and stuff like that. Like, very cool.
That's awesome. I wonder if that was for the press tour.
Like something like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Another thing that I'll mention is they did an interesting thing where the centrifugal sort of spinning that the ship had to do to create artificial gravity. There was originally a thing in the book where like they had to detach ships and he would have to do it and do some experiments and then reattach and all that stuff. And instead here they just had Rocky's ship also rotate in that motion.
Very cool. It was like they were dancing together, which mimicked like when they actually do kind of dance with each other a couple times. And yeah, I liked that.
That was a cool idea and cool change. And I think there's something said in the book about how like it like Rocky's ship, I can't remember, like maybe it's too big, or I can't remember like why they weren't both just spinning and staying connected, but
I don't know.
That was a cool way that they overcame that and like kind of thought through that. One thing that's not here is this, like, they never talk about the coma gene thing, which I understand. Cutting that. There's no characters that need in the book. Characters need to be analyzed to see if they have a certain gene, to see if they can survive
comas
a long-term
of the length
coma.
That they need to. Yeah. And Ryland's like one of the few. It's like 1 in 100 people have this gene. Ryland.
It's one of the reasons why he was like the last person that could go on the mission, because he was trained and also had...
It adds further credence to the idea that it really does need to be him. So we also get here the reveal where Ava Stratt forced him to go, which we talked about a lot in the book episode, but I think is essential to the character. I think it's essential to his arc and his journey, that he shows that he is not brave here, right? Like, it kind of... it creates this void that he then needs to step into later on with what happens with Rocky. So I really like this. I think it's a cool moment. It's not necessarily what people are expecting. I think they're thinking he was going to be kind of heroic from the start. But that's one of the key differences, you know, as we talked about between him and Mark Watney. I feel like Mark Watney's the kind of guy to volunteer for something like this, and he's not, ultimately.
And I mean, it's a great arc to go on to, right? Like, there's this character in the book that's talked about a lot, like, he's a coward. Like, he is a coward. He doesn't want to do this stuff. He knows that, like, he just wants to die with everybody else if that's how it's going to go down. Mm-hmm. He doesn't want to be the person to sacrifice himself early and all this stuff. He just doesn't want to die. And for him to eventually, like for that to be a main through line, and then for the film and the story to end how it does, like, it's just such a powerful move. And like you said, like, it creates, I think the reluctant hero kind of thing is such a fun trope that it's powerful and effective for a reason. I think a lot of people like to think that they'd be like, yeah, I'll sacrifice myself, but like, push comes to shove, a lot of people are probably a little more scared of that than they would,
absolutely,
be willing to admit, or to themselves even. It's cool to see like a realistic depiction of somebody like this, and then how it's forced upon him, and then how you can rise to that occasion, and how that makes for such a satisfying, optimistic film here. This is something I hadn't thought about before, but Rocky was in the Tau system basically any time that Ryland Grace looked up at the stars growing up. Like, that whole time Rocky was out there already stranded by himself.
Because he was there
in
for
the
years.
Tau system. He was there for like 46 years.
Yeah.
And like, that's such a, like, just to think about, of course they live longer than we do, but I don't know if they emphasize that enough in the movie, that like, he's by himself.
Yeah, so they talk about him living longer. I don't know if he says that he'd been out there for 40 years or whatever.
Yeah. So maybe he didn't in the film, but that's some like context for the book that I just like was like, man, that's such a powerful, like, think about how desperate this character was. And he's an engineer. He wouldn't have figured this stuff out on his own without a scientist to come along like Ryland Grace. And
yeah,
I love that, like, they play off each other in that way. All right, so moving into the third part here. Following Tau Ceti's Petrova line, Grace and Rocky find that the planet Tau Ceti, which they name Adrian after Rocky's mate and Adrian Panino, harbors an organism which preys on astrophages, controlling its population. After learning that Grace cannot return home, Rocky offers enough astrophages to refuel Hail Mary. While gathering the organism from the upper atmosphere of Adrian, a fuel leak causes an uncontrollable spin which renders Grace unconscious. Rocky breaks his spacesuit and saves Grace, but is severely injured. While Rocky recovers in hibernation, Grace finds a way to breed the astrophage-consuming organism, which he calls Taumiba. Rocky revives, and he and Grace part as friends to return to their respective solar systems. During the trip to Earth, Grace discovers that Talmiba has evolved the ability to pass through their xenonite containers and is eating Hail Mary's fuel. Grace fixes the problem on his ship, but realizes that Rocky's entire ship is made of xenonite, which allow the Talmiba to consume all of his fuel. Left with the choice of returning to Earth or saving Rocky and his homeworld, Grace chooses to save his friend, sending Talmiba and his research to Earth via the probes. The probes deliver to Strat on Earth what humanity needs to kill Astrophage. The Iridians create a biodome on their planet for Grace to live in. Rocky tells him that the scientists have finished preparing Hail Mary to return to Earth. While contemplating the news, Grace begins another day of teaching science to Iridian children.
Yeah, I love that they kept that part. So let's back it up. One of the things I did notice in this is, and some of this is in the book too, but we have a lot of space-related hijinks on these spacewalks and this fishing part. It's good, high action, cool visuals as they're like basically trolling along the edge of this gas planet. It looks great. We do have a lot of pretty out there stuff with like him just like randomly catching things that are flying by and like very near disasters happening over and over again. I don't know. I thought this was pretty cool. It definitely stretches credibility a little bit that this is something he would be able to do. I guess to each their own on whether or not they're going to end up ultimately liking this, but it's kind of really cool for me that I'm like, I think this is cool enough. I think this works.
They like to add the drama, the things that, like, a visual language that we've seen before in space films, that sort of like tension that you get of being like on a tether and you might fly off into the distance, and all the stuff that he's doing that I feel like the book was very meticulous and careful to be like, this is more realistic. And this was kind of just like, this is it's a Hollywood blockbuster. Like, we're going to get some legitimate tension in here from that's like, more urgent and a little more risky. And maybe it makes the character seem a little more cavalier or something.
For sure.
Maybe a little like taking some risks that don't need to happen. But man, there's some really great sequences here. Like, the mission that they go on, the way that it's depicted in the film, I mean, it's like very much from the book, but putting the ship into orbit and kind of rotating around, and that jet that's like coming out of the back of the ship that's like creating a fire in the atmosphere, and all the tension of that scene was so high. Obviously he like gets like pinned down at one point, and that's like, again, that added drama that we're talking about.
Definitely really cool moment where Rocky comes to save him.
That's like a little later. I'm talking about like on the outside of the ship, he gets pinned down by his tethers, get all tied up. But yeah, once they're inside and then the astrophage are escaping and it creates this like out of control spin. That's like a moment that really stuck with me in the book. And you were saying like that he's like pinned to the monitor and Rocky comes.
Yeah, Rocky breaks out to save him. This is a moment right out of the book. I love how it was shown, the way that Rocky, we see sort of, he's like kind of a burning on fire from the the different atmosphere. It changes a little bit in the sense that we don't see as much of Ryland taking, like, kind of saving him back by getting him back into his enclosure. Like, he was able to kind of climb himself back into his own enclosure, which does make a little more sense with how things play out, I think.
Yeah, but I did miss, like, I like that both of them, so they're both here to save their civilization. And what I like about them kind of almost sacrificing themselves for each other is, like, it becomes so much about their bond and their relationship. Yes, there's these larger problems that they absolutely want to save. They're desperate to save their races. But like the fact that he's like, this is my friend, he's right here and he's hurt. And he picks up in the book, I think also in the film, Rocky's like 400 degrees or something, and he like picks him up and it like burns him.
Yeah, they show his burnt arm at one point, but I was like unclear when that happened because I don't remember him like carrying him in that way.
Maybe when he was like pulling him off of being pinned down or something. But yeah, there was like a burn, but I just like the idea of him like, almost sacrificing himself for Rocky to be like, I'm gonna like let it burn me, and then he does the whole thing where he flips the hatch and it blows ammonia at him. And
so if I can think about it from a storytelling point of view for a second, I think the probably the thinking around this is that Rocky saving Ryland creates a little bit of a debt. And they've already kind of saved each other, but like this is a very direct saving. And Ryland then can equalize that debt by doing what he does at the end of the film. Whereas in the book, I think that's still true. And I think that's maybe the reason for, and I don't know if this is even consciously chosen, but I think that's why he saves Rocky in the book, but also almost kills him by blasting off all the like black stuff that's on him, and then he finds out that was like scabbing, and that like it almost killed him to do that. And that, I think, kind of neutralizes the like tit for tat, like you saved me, I saved you, kind of we're square feeling that you would have otherwise had.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I like the idea that like the decision that he makes at the end is, rather than trying to like tit for tat, I like the idea that he does it because of the growth of the character, of the fact that he's
and I think it is that. I just think it creates like a narrative momentum towards that decision, where it feels like natural to us, even if we're not cognizantly aware of why.
Yeah. But I love that, like, I again, in talking to the people that I saw it with, like, it still was, all that stuff was as emotionally impactful. The film was still working for all of them. I like that the Rocky Ryland relationship was there. It was cemented. Their sacrifices made sense, and everybody was on board with that.
And I loved their relationship, and their like roommate antics were really good. Very, very classic.
I got to talk about too, like, before this happens, there's the sequence where they are going through the Petrova line, and there's like, so we've talked about, like, in the book, at least, we talked about how like it's imperceptible. The astrophage is like a little imperceptible, but they're shooting light out of themselves for
it's
propulsion,
like infrared
basically.
light or something.
And it's infrared light, so they can't see it with the normal eye, and they use this Petrova scope to see it and everything like that. And the way that the film does this, and specifically the cinematographer Greg Fraser, how they accomplish this awesome scene, they filmed with Alexa 65s, and they've shot with two of them at the same time for this sequence, where he kind of he's like on top of the ship, and they're skimming the Petrova line to try to get the astrophage that's in this system, to make sure it's the same as the other ones, and to see, like, the amount and everything, and realize that, like, they're not making the journey back and forth. They're just going.
Well, they're trying to find the reason for what's going on here, the Talmuba. They don't know yet this Talmuba they're looking for. They're looking for the Talmuba.
And so they're up there, and they shot it with two cameras. One camera they removed the IR filter from, and they actually use like infrared light on like chicken wire, from what I understand.
Whoa.
And they like moved it in close to Gosling, and that was where you could, like, they were cutting. There's that transition from like the normal looking footage to where it's like the little red dots are everywhere, and it's this magical movie moment. And they did that like practically with his reaction to it. And they used like also like water in front of the lens for part of it, when it's like in the close-ups and stuff, to like kind of add this like smearing effect to it, and this like fluidity.
That's really cool, man. Yeah, I had no idea how they achieved that. Cool moment in the movie. It was already beautiful as he's looking out at this planet, and it's kind of like green and orange swirlies, and I felt like it was really inspired by the actual photos of Jupiter. I think it was that NASA published, and like how the systems of storm systems like look on Jupiter. Like I could see that being reflected in how they designed this,
especially that
to look.
Gigantic hurricane or whatever, that gigantic storm that's on Jupiter that people say is like larger than the whole of the Earth.
Wide.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It
looks awesome. So all of that, I thought was so cool that they were pulling that off like practically, and like overall how it looked. And he does the flip there, and he's like, "What are you doing, Grace?" And he's like, "Having a moment." Yeah, it's so good. So I just thought, again, that's a small detail. I'd love to talk about all of them, but that's one moment where it's like pulling it off visually. It looks unique, like visually unique, and,
cool.
And like I just thought it was like, it's such a pretty film for something that we've seen so many times before. It's hard to reinvent the wheel for space travel in a film, and to have things look different.
So I don't know if you heard this one. It was another behind the scenes thing I heard. Gosling was saying that during there's a couple different parts where he was using an earwig. One was when he's like doing stuff in the lab and doing the stuff where he was like writing out equations on the blackboard. Both of those, he had like someone in his ear telling him what to do, basically, because he's like, I don't understand how to do this stuff. And then another moment where he had one apparently was when Rocky was like having this like emotional, I forget exactly what has been said in this scene, but it's like Rocky's talking to him, he's walking away, and then he turns around. Oh, it's when he's like finds out that he's going to be able to return home.
Yeah.
He said that he had his own children in his ear.
Yeah, I did hear this. Yeah,
saying the lines, I think, and that helped him like get the tears that he needed for that scene. So I thought that was cool. Whatever it takes.
Yeah, I mean, that's beautiful, right? And that'll forever be cemented in the minds of the children and Gosling in this moment, and like how like their love is like coming through that character. Like, that's awesome. I thought that was so cool when I heard that. Yeah. So we've talked about this last week and this a little bit in this episode already, but I wanted to mention again, like the like heart of this film is this idea of like humanity coming together, but then seeing like these two species come together, trying to solve extinction level events for each of them, and how like science and math are such a logical field, and using that as the language to like learn from each other, and then eventually get to like a state of empathy towards each other, to the point that they die and possibly risk the survival of their species for each other. And like how powerful that is, and what like a message that's sending, just in the idea of like how important, you know, the survival of the species is. Like, there's all kinds of stuff that we can do to save the planet, but also just like to see each other for who we are, and know some people may be better at other things, and just like meeting each other where they are. Like, I liked seeing Rocky and Grace, like there's the moment where they hug even, and Rocky's like, what's happening here? Or the like, you sleep I watch kind of stuff, like how like culturally there's like they just kind of agree amongst themselves.
I love that cultural stuff made it in there.
That they're like, hey, you know, whatever you guys do culturally, like I'll respect, and you do the same. And I love how that like manifests in the film, and like the watching, like Rocky's butt is like right above him, or what he perceives as his butt right above him while he's sleeping, and how he's freaked out by it. All that was played for laughs, but it was really fun and sweet. And then same thing with the hug, where like when that final moment does happen, and like how they do it a couple times, and you're just like, oh man, it's so cathartic, and just like again, that's that through line of optimism that I didn't want to spoil with an Alien early in the non-spoilers, but like it just gives you such hope for not just the world, but maybe the universe. You know, I like how it really like tugs at the heartstrings in those ways. And that really leads us to the end where Ryland goes back for his friend,
makes the decision to
sacrifice play,
not return to Earth. I do think once again it's essential that Ryland doesn't have a family, doesn't have connections back home. He does have this connection to Ava Stratt, and that kind of exists in the novel, but not it's more here. And I like that he's able to send her the messages, that we get a shot of her on the ship watching, so we know that she receives them. And you know, she has kind of like a knowing smile, or however you want to read that. We know she has a reaction to them, and we know that she's able to save the planet. So it's successful for him. And then we get his massive enclosure. We don't explore a lot of the logistics of this. I saw this pointed out that like in the book,
the food,
it's very clear that he doesn't have anything to eat. And
Yeah.
so it's like, what is he going to eat? And there's a big plot point where he ends up eating the Talmiva itself. That's like the organic thing he figures out he can eat. And then eventually he starts eating me burgers, which they don't really explain, but it seems like they're like cloning his own meat somehow, and he's eating it.
Yeah.
So there's that kind of stuff, but we don't get any of that in the movie. That kind of it's hand waved away, I think.
Quite weird, but also like it's funny that the me burger.
And it's because specifically on this planet is like completely inhospitable. There's nothing here that can feed him.
Well, they talk about like Rocky's food source is like full of heavy metals and poisons and all these things that would kill him, basically. And then it gets to what is a much more like, again, with the food situation and not mentioning the planet and seeing what the planet is versus how it's depicted in the book. In the book, it was like they don't need light, right? So it's just a black planet that doesn't have light, doesn't have any of this stuff. And it seems like he's in a dome where they've created like incandescent lighting.
They've created an environment for him. He's got a beach. I love that shot of like how they were agitating the water to create the waves. That was really cool.
Well, what I mean to say is like in the book, it's basically like a rocky terrain that he's in, and they've created incandescent lighting, so he has some lighting, but it's artificial. Here they've created something that's much more, you can understand how he could be there for longer.
Definitely.
And also like a bunch of time has passed in the book. He's like older, and the environment is dealing.
Yeah, unclear how long has passed in the movie. It does feel, it felt kind of like he should look older than he does.
And also like the effects of the gravity on him is being talked about in the book, where like he's kind of feeling older than even maybe he is, and so he doesn't know how much longer he'll live. Whereas here they're like, we've refueled your ship and there's a good chance you can go back to Earth now, and he's young enough, and it seems like you could leave off and say maybe he could stay here on this planet or leave in the movie. But in the book it was clear he probably won't leave. At least that's where I was.
I felt the same way, but I do think in both cases it's ambiguous whether or not he will.
Yeah.
I could see it going. Like, I could see him at some point deciding he wants to make the trip back.
Also, just that environment being so much more hospitable to a human.
Yeah.
And
I saw some people calling for or asking Andy Weir about a sequel. And I'm like,
oh, so he said that he in an interview with with Gosling and Lord and Miller, he said that there was an explanation for how the other astronauts died, but he was like, I know how that happened, but I'm going to keep it just in case for a sequel in the possible future. And I was like, whoa, I was like, interesting.
That would be wild. I was going to say, I mean, I don't know. If he made a sequel, I would be first in line, I'd be very excited. But also, this is such a great standalone story. It doesn't need a sequel. Like, it works so perfectly this way. I don't know why people would look at this and feel like it needs a sequel, and I just don't think that does. I think there's just a natural sense that people want more of something they really love, and I get that. But also, you can let things just be singular and be special, and I think that's what this movie ultimately is.
So in the book, we don't get a scene back on Earth at all. In this film, we get a scene back on Earth. We get to see that they actually get the Talmiba. But one of the things that I liked is that they showed the same hangar from before. It was sunny there before, and now they showed the hangar where they're bringing the Talmiba at the end, and it's covered in snow, blizzard. So seemingly the Earth has progressed as they thought.
Certainly, yeah. We see her when she's on the ship. They're like sailing through ice.
Yeah. So it's like the Earth was in dire straits and it did get there, but getting the confirmation in that way versus just the data that the sun heated back up.
Yeah, it stopped its dimming.
They tied the bow for the film because you want to see that.
Well, that's what you do when you're in a story that is very, very tied to one POV in fiction, and you don't want to break that by giving us something that is omniscient or from another POV versus what they do here, where it's just like, we'll pop over and see what's going on with the other characters. That's just a very natural thing for film to do, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I just note that it was different.
It is different.
But they did a good job of kind of depicting the world was ending. He did it.
And because of what they developed between him and Ava Stratt as a little bit of a relationship, if you want to call it that, I think it makes sense.
Yeah. And I also do want to note too, using the Beatles, actually using a song from the Beatles in the film. That was of course I thought that might happen. The fact that they used Two of Us was really cool, and it really fit the film, and they're playing it, and then the pods go out and everything. And it was just, it was nice to kind of wrap it all together because there are so many references in the book.
Yeah. That part was kind of glossed over too. We didn't get the whole development of the Beatles part, which was a part of the book for sure. I'm assuming that's in that 4-hour cut somewhere.
Sure. They used them for navigation at one point. Remember, he doesn't have to scrape out the fuel tanks with nitrogen. There's all kinds of stuff that didn't make the cut. So if you liked watching the movie, as Luke said earlier, the book is definitely worth reading, and I highly recommend it.
Speaking of that, let's do our final ratings, book versus movie. What did you ultimately like better? Do you want to start?
This is a hard one because I thought about this a little bit ago, and I was like, honestly, they're pretty close for me. I was like, I wanted to just say a tie, but I was like, I'm going to push myself here. And surprisingly, I think to you, I'm going to take the book because I felt like while the movie had so much that I loved visually, I love seeing these characters feel more rich based on performances in a lot of ways. I love Ryan Gosling. I mean, this is probably one of my favorite performances of his now, and such a cool film for him to be involved in from the beginning. I thought that the humor that they imbued, seeing him and everything with Rocky, seeing it all on screen was so cool. But I loved reading this book and getting all the nitty gritty, the hard science that typically isn't something that I'm oh, I must have it, but having it in that, and having everything so expertly and meticulously doled out really built a fun experience for me with this film. And everything internally made sense and had continuity that I bought into, and it just took me on such a journey that I felt like I got to live with it a bit longer. And for those reasons, I'm taking the book in this case, with the caveat that I almost said a tie.
All right, man. Well, maybe I'll surprise you because I'm going to take the movie on this one.
Nice.
We're going to flip our normal roles here, I guess.
This is maybe one of the only times this has ever happened.
And my reasoning is, once again, it was very close. And my actual thing that I would tell people for this is kind of similar to what I said at the start, which is I think this is a great pairing. This is one of those where there are times where I'll tell people just see the movie, or you know what, skip the movie, just read the book. Or if you're interested, do both. But this is one where I'm like, man, I really think this is a good pairing of film and book because they inform each other. And I think watch this film, fall in love with this film, and then if you want to know more about the science, go check out the book because it does do a better job of that, as you were saying. And I did find that I missed some of those elements. That's one of the reasons why it was so close for me. But there's so many things that the movie brings. The visuals, the characters, the music, the heart. Not to say that the book has none of those, but just like the something special that happens here in this film that I really love, and I'm gonna give it to the movie slightly. And then I think that's a fun inversion of what often happens in this podcast.
That's cool. I am curious too, because for me, one other thing that I'll say is that I thought it through, and I was like, if I hadn't read the book, I don't know if I would love the movie the way that I do.
Yeah.
I think I would still really like it, but I love the movie because of all the context that I got from the book, and that kind of gave it the leg up. So
I don't know. That's not an experience that we can have, unfortunately, because of the way we do this podcast. But I'll tell you what, if you are watching this or you're listening to this, let us know your experience with it. Did you read the book? And if so, did you think one was better? We want to know your votes. Always curious about that. And if you're a movie-only watcher who didn't read the book, do you feel like you got all the full impact of this stuff? Are you curious about the book now? I'd love to hear all that stuff, and leaving them in the comment section below if you're on YouTube is a great way to help our engagement. Also, if you'd like to join our Discord, we put a link to that under the show notes, and we have conversations like that in dedicated threads to each of our projects, and there'll be one on Project Hail Mary, and we'd love to have you over there.
Yeah. And be sure to connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, all of those at Ink to Film.
And if you'd like to support this podcast in another way, as we said earlier, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/inktofilm. I'll point you to that if you enjoyed this episode. We'd love to have your support. We'd love to have you over there listening to our bonus content that we release every month. We just would hope that you would check it out. And that's, once again, patreon.com/inktofilm.
And thank you to Ross Bugden for the use of our intro and outro music.
All right, man, that's going to be it for Project Hail Mary. Crazy to say, we've done it now.
Yeah.
This was one we've been looking forward to for a long time.
What
Up next, we have What Moves the Dead, which is T. Kingfisher's a retelling of the Fall of House of Usher. I haven't read it yet. We're about to read it for the first time. We're going to talk about it with each other next week. And then that same week, we're going to be interviewing T. Kingfisher at NorwestCon. And those episodes will be coming out in the future. Really excited for it. Definitely a little bit outside of our typical. There's not like a film that we're going to be tackling here, but we thought it would be fun, and we just had this kind of unique opportunity to do this interview. Hopefully everybody will be interested in this and stick around with us, even though we won't have the film. We'd love to have your support for these upcoming episodes.
Yeah, and I'm super excited to meet T. Kingfisher and speak with her about her work, because and that's such a cool thing for her to agree to become on the podcast in this way at a live show.
Our second ever live show.
Guest of honor at NorwestCon, so I am super excited, and I can't wait to talk about her work.
Yeah, it'll be good to see you again in person, man. It's been since since your wedding.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's going to be it. So all that's left to say is until next time.
Keep adapting.